Hey guys, welcome back to another educational video. This is the youtube.com/generic tech support channel. If you guys are watching this, you should know that everything we do is for educational value. All the software is purchased or used under legal availability. This channel does not promote or suggest the use of pirated software. All links are located on the Tech Guy 1 wiki page. This channel, again, is for educational purposes only. Like and subscribe for more content. I provide you guys the best practices or best experience and insight into doing things, but I don't know everything. So if you guys know something that I don't, please leave it in the comments. Thanks again for watching. Hey guys, welcome back to Integral Edition. So the reason why we're reviewing this operating system again is because there was a recent release of an update. The updated package is set to have the complete update package available for the point-of-sale systems, as well as all the XP updates, the WannaCry virus patches as well. So I figure we owe it to Ramsey to recheck this operating system and see what it looks like. And if you don't know who he is, hit up the Zone website and buy him a coffee, get him something, because these are not easy packages to build. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into these configurations, and you know, they really could use all the resources and help that they could get for these customized builds. And this is one that's very in-depth with a lot of configuration involved and a lot of things that are involved in order to get it to work with modern hardware, which is not an easy feat. So if you haven't already, visit the Zone website, hit him up in the chat, sign up to an account or something, drop him a message, let him know how well he's doing in the actual application and the operating system. And without further ado, let's continue on this process now of getting this installed again on our virtual machine. And let's take a look at this package and compare it to our vanilla version of Windows XP to see where we're at from a security perspective. And let's see if we're more secure than we were in the previous videos. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the full installation process because it's pretty much the same as it was prior. But if there's any changes in the operating system during the installation process, I'll re-kick up the video and we'll take it from there. Okay guys, so at this point we have Integral Edition installed again, and this should be a pretty familiar view at this point as far as Windows XP is concerned on our Integral Edition. If you didn't catch the previous videos, check them out, but with this later version of the operating system, I figured the first thing we could do is check our add remove programs to see what we have installed. And we can see that we do have quite a bit of things installed right off the bat. We have .NET Framework, we have the MyPal68 installer, which is the updated version of our Firefox application for our Windows XP system. Looks like we have a shell extension. We have the Alt-Tab switcher. Let's see if there's updates. We do have a couple updates installed right off the bat with the package, just 2 of them it looks like for the Microsoft.NET Framework. Let's go to Add Remove Windows Components and see if we got anything in here. We have a BitLocker go-to reader. That's interesting. So that's something new. That's something I don't believe we saw in the previous version. We have a smart card driver. Windows Rights Management Client. That's interesting. What we got? Well, it's already installed, but now it's installed again. At any rate, so we do have a couple things installed. So that's interesting. Let's move along and see what else is on here. So we can see that we still have our Windows Firewall turned off. We still have the out-of-the-box configuration for our exceptions. So nothing new is in there. But again, Windows XP is one of those operating systems that the vast majority of people who have used XP generally disable the Windows Firewall and install an antivirus. Although this particular system does not have an antivirus on it out of the box. So removing the Windows Firewall is probably not necessarily a good practice. And in my opinion, it should be something that you as the user should handle yourself, so that way the liability doesn't fall on Ramsey and the Integral Edition as far as security is concerned. But with that said, we don't have the complete package installed yet. So in the previous build, we did the installation and then there was an installer option inside of the actual operating system. Whereas in this build, now we have an ISO file with goodies and extras. So let's take a look at that ISO file. Let me get that mounted and let's open that up and see what's in there. So I have that ISO file installed or mounted onto our XP machine. And as we can see in here, we have programs and tools. So we have a variety of programs that we can install on this particular system. We have Windows XP components, which is like Outlook Express. We have the Active Directory application mode, Windows Management Framework Core, Microsoft Windows Movie Maker, PowerShell version 1, Windows Search 4, and the XPS Essentials pack. We have additional drivers, which looks like we have wireless drivers, configuration. There's 2 updates listed in here. If you go to Ramsey's site, it indicates that these updates are Vista updates that were ported for this particular operating system, but they have buggy issues, so they're not installed out of the box. Those are things that we could install, but there's no reason to do that. If they already know that they're buggy on this particular version of XP, I don't want to add bugs to the operating system. So we have IE6. This is our IE rollback, so we could go to IE8, 7, or 6. We have Service Pack 3 image files. So there's Windows Media Player 9 and IE6. And we have Windows Player 9 itself, and Windows Media Player 10, and Windows Media Player 11. So that's what appears to be on our ISO file. But we have additional files outside of the ISO file. Let's get those files moved over to the operating system and take a look and see what those are. So if I'm being critical, the update packages that are available on that actual ISO file. So when you unzip the zip file that you get from the download, it comes with 2 ISO files. One's the extras, one's the installation. After the installation, you could review the extras, which we just looked at. But then there's these 2 additional folders, which is information and patch integrator. In my opinion, these 2 files should also be ISO files, just so you can mount them and take a look at them. So basically, you'd have 3 CDs burned, one with your updates, one with your actual configuration, and one with your Windows operating system itself. Because, again, we have limitations on size, right? So having the ability to mount something, even in a USB drive, an ISO file to a USB drive after the operating system is installed, so you could browse to it and you can access the files, in my opinion, would be easier than having them just as raw files. But that's, again, if I'm being critical. I don't want to be critical, not for this particular platform, just because this is still in development. It's one of the few that are homebrew type of Windows XP systems that are still being developed and still being used and still being made better. So again, shout out to Ramsey for his hard work and all his team for continuing this project. Let's take a look now into our patch integrator and our information. So I'm not going to show the information and what's in this actual folder, but there are registry keys and modifications specifically in there for the Integral Edition. And if you guys want to run them after you download the package, that's up to you. I've reviewed them. They're pretty standard, but I'm not going to show them on the video because of YouTube's terms and service. Or rather, maybe I should say terms of service, but you get what I'm saying. With that said, let's take a look at the patch integrator. So in here, we actually have utilities, so we could install like 7-zip. There's a variety of different things in here as well. But again, 7-zip is here. Signing tools for certificates, signatures. We have a hex editor in here as well. So we do have utilities in there. And then we also have our patches. So if we jump down into our patches, we can see all the patches that are available on this particular system. Let's actually run the options CMD and see what we get. So this is actually really kind of cool. So this gives us the ability to add things to this Windows XP operating system. For instance, the ability to install 64 gigs of RAM on a Windows XP to fix the 4 gig limitation and use this to avoid the stability issues. And it gives you more details as to each one of these configurations added in here. And again, I've reviewed the actual script itself in the CMD, and this is perfectly fine. There's nothing in there that looks vindictive or like it was done out of malice or would contain any kind of malware or questionable things in the config itself. They're all patches and functions to make the operating system function on later hardware. So again, cheers to Ramsey for going through this to get this done. Let's see if we could run the updates, because again, the thing is that the operating system apparently contains the updates, but we don't see them in our add remove Windows components or add remove programs. So I'm curious if maybe we could see them in our command line. Okay, so as you can see, we do have 653 patches installed on our Windows XP machine. So this does contain most of the updates. It does have the Point of Sale 2009 updates from what I can tell, and it also has the Windows XP Service Pack 3 updates. But there's an additional 300 updates that would be updates that I would say are various security fixes for Windows XP, which are not part of the original Windows XP a la carte website. So in other words, you can still get them from the catalog, but you need to know specifically what updates you're looking for. The only way to really pull them correctly would be to use a WSUS server, and then in the WSUS server configuration, allow the WSUS server to download not only the POS updates, but also the updates for the non-POS 2009, the CE edition, as well as the embedded version of Windows XP, and then Windows XP Media Center. And if you download all of those updates and then you look through the combination of updates available in there, you'll find security patches to fix things like the ransomware problems and later updates that weren't part of the original packages but were available for download for fixes. So presumably my best guess is that we're missing those updates. But let's take a look at the registry to see if there's any configurations in our SecEdit policy. So as you can see, we do have SecEdit configuration in here, and we have quite a bit in here. And this is actually really impressive. This means that Ramsey basically used our configuration or a configuration of likeness to secure the operating system. So we do have a variety of configuration in here. Now, I don't know if they're configured for security or configured for functionality, because you got to keep in mind that things like do not display the last logged in user, you could set that to yes, don't display it, or no, don't display it. So no, don't display it means display it. You can configure additional details in here as well as like password expiration warning, the amount of days. So based on this, the value type is 4. So 4 days before the password expires, it'll let you know. Force unlock an account, cache logon count. So we do have quite a bit of configuration in here. And as to whether or not that configuration translates into security, we'll be able to tell once we run our Nessus scanner, but so far this operating system looks a lot better than it did in the previous revision. So I would definitely give Ramsey 2 thumbs up on this, because again, this looks much, much better than it did on the previous version. There's a lot of work that went into this, I could tell. So we do still have some configuration problems in the OS, but they're really simple to fix. Specifically, we still have our settings turned on for allowing remote assistance into the system from Microsoft's home. We don't want that, especially in a homebrew system. We want to disable that, but that's enabled on this particular operating system. I also noticed that we still have our volume shadow copy services running for our snapshotting for system recovery. Again, these are things that we probably don't want to have running on this particular system. We could go into our system restore, for instance. This should be turned off, right? There's no reason to run system restore. What the hell do we need system restore on a Windows XP machine for? Windows updates are turned off, which is fine because, again, we have presumably all the updates that were available on the system, which is based off the point-of-sale stuff. Again, I know we're missing some additional patches here just because I'm in the process of the Granite XP build, so there's about 200 additional updates that were available for Windows XP that aren't included in this operating system. Actually, probably closer to 300 updates, but as far as whether or not they're necessary, that's to be determined because, again, we're going to run a scan against this thing and see how this thing looks. But, again, allowing remote connection to this computer, I mean, realistically, these two things should be shut off. If you want to allow remote desktop to your machine, you should turn it on yourself. And then I would suggest what you do is custom port mapping and don't use 3389, just because 3389 is a common port used for injection of ransomware and other stuff. Now, again, with Windows XP, it's really not that big of a deal, right? Your likelihood of getting ransomware on an XP system is pretty slim because it's SMB1, it doesn't support the later installation packages, but because this operating system provides customization that gives you some of that later ability, that's that later availability, that later configuration where you could basically run newer functions, you really don't want to have default ports turned on. Because the more newer stuff you inject into Windows XP, the more you expose yourself to possible issues and risk. When you're running the old version of Windows XP, it's not as high of a risk because it doesn't run anything new, right? So you don't have to worry about the later installation process. You don't have to worry about 64-bit applications attempting to install. You don't have to worry about configurations that require a certain version of the executable version or the MSI installers. It just doesn't work the same way. So you reduce your risk because their footprint isn't as great in the later configuration scope. But when you start modernizing the operating system with additional functions, that's when you allow yourself to have the possibility of greater risk or greater infection. So in systems like this, I would just suggest shutting off the remote assist in a remote desktop, unless you absolutely need it turned on where you need to remote into it, in which case I would use a custom port. And I would do custom port configuration and change it from 3389 to like 43389 or something to that effect, because those pre-programmed applications out there that will infect off of 3389, they won't infect off of 43389. And I know you could argue and say, well, I don't have a NAT set up on the outside, but you know, when you have an XP machine and you're building it for gaming, chances are you're not going to be playing it by yourself all the time. You probably have friends that want to play it. It greatly expands the risk of infection. So I would just make sure you turn these things off. And also, you really don't want this thing phoning home, so remote assistance should be turned off. With that said, again, not trying to be critical, because you could tell that a lot of work went into this operating system, at least between the last time we reviewed it and now. As far as security is concerned, it's almost night and day. It's almost unbelievable how much, what the difference is between this and what it was. I'm really curious what it's going to look like on our Nessus scanner, just because of the additional securities that are in place. But that said, we still have a customized operating system, so there's also the possibility that we're going to see exposure or issues that don't exist in the previous version of Windows. So once we run our scan, we should be able to tell again and take a look. But I'm excited to see what those results look like. Okay, guys, so what I want to do is, before we jump into the actual scan to show what our Windows XP looks like on our Integral Edition, what I'm going to show you is what the baseline on Windows XP is. So this system is baselined based off of a configuration of Windows XP Service Pack 3. Now you'll notice that in previous videos where we've done baselines of Service Pack 3, we've had hundreds of results. And the reason why we don't have them here is because I trimmed them out. I'm just trying to be completely transparent with you. There's absolutely no reason for us to have the remediation scan show the remediation to go through the hundreds of registry changes we need to make in order to fix the operating system. I've already done that. So trimming that stuff out, running the scan based off of Windows XP, not doing the scan based off of an exposure rate based off of Windows XP on a modern infrastructure. There's really absolutely no reason for us to show that. I mean, the reality is that you're not going to use the XP machine the same way you're going to use a Windows 11 machine. So as a result, what we're looking at here is really a more realistic view as to what the compromise or the level of security concern that Windows XP Service Pack 3 has. And again, this is out of the box, no updates, right? So that's basically what you'll get off of an ISO file with Windows XP Service Pack 3. Now, with that said, let's take a look at our Granite XP. So our Granite XP package breaks that down to just 11 infos. And the reason why is because there's configuration in place on that machine that locks down the system. And you'll notice that in the 11 infos, we don't get the notification like we would do in our legacy configuration here for Windows XP, indicating that this is an unsupported operating system. And the reason why is because in the Granite XP package, I have the operating system disclosure disabled in the registry. So even when we run the scan, it never discloses the operating system. So that's why you don't see that. Now, since this is the Integral Edition, maybe we should compare it to a Windows XP Mazza edition that was basically released in 2009, I believe the date was on that operating system. So that machine shows a lower rate as well, right? So we have 4 criticals, 2 high, 1 medium, 25 infos. And if we compare that to our legacy, our baseline, that's 4 critical, 2 high, 1 medium, 1 low, 27 infos. So the Mazza edition is slightly better than what our XP Service Pack 3 is out of the box. Let's take a look now at our Integral Edition. So this is our Integral Edition, and let's take a look to see what we got. We have 2 criticals, 1 high, 1 medium, and 27 info. So we still have our unsupported operating system detection, which indicates that that registry key hasn't been modified on the system. We already know, but I mean, honestly, it doesn't really matter, right? We know that it's Windows XP and it's not supported. So that 1 critical that is being alerted inside of our actual scan here out of the 2, realistically, that's not a critical issue. We're aware of that. So we would say that's 1 critical 1 high, 1 medium, and 27 info. So let's take a look to see if we could figure out what our secondary count is for our other critical alert that is in this scan. So what we actually have is our other critical is odd because, and maybe not so much, right? So during the scan, the system's scanning the remediation packages that are available on the operating system. So we could see that it reports back as being embedded Service Pack 2 and Service Pack 3. Service Pack 2 is a little bizarre. I don't really know why we're seeing that, because generally speaking with Service Pack 2, we shouldn't be seeing that as an operating system, at least in a Service Pack 3 scan, unless there's customization in the operating system that was required from the Service Pack 2 version in order to work on the Service Pack 3. And I remember briefly at some point in one of the comments on one of the previous videos that the PAE for the configuration of the additional memory required an older version of Windows, and it wasn't supported in later versions. So it's possible that that's why we're seeing that here. Again, it's not a critical issue, really, because we know that it's an unsupported operating system, and we know that the customization involved is going to show certain things. And showing doesn't necessarily mean it's a remote capability or an issue. Now, another thing that we see in here is our high alert, which is our SMB null authentication value. And that's a customization that realistically you would need to add registry modifications into the system to lock down the SMB. So that way you wouldn't allow the remote execution for anonymous authentication. This is something that still exists to this day in Windows 10 and 11, where there's patches that we could apply to actually fix the issue. But those same patches work on Windows XP. It's literally just one registry key modification. So again, while this isn't ideal to have in here, because you could technically allow remote access into your system without any authentication, the truth of the matter is that Windows 10 and 11 have SMB1 turned off by default, so they wouldn't be able to communicate with us anyway. So the only people that would really benefit from accessing the system are people that have similar systems or have a reason to attempt to do it, because the Windows XP machine is not going to be able to communicate with the later operating systems. And the medium that we see is SMB signing is not required. Again, this is a configuration problem inside of the registry that you would need to add in order to secure it. It's part of the NIST configuration, so there's probably some package in that SecEdit that's missing that would be required in order to actually lock this down. We can see the published date is from 2012, but the modified date is from 2022, which obviously if this is the 2009 edition of Point of Sale, then this postdates that substantially. So I mean, it's customization that would be required in order to lock it down. But with all that said, let's talk about this operating system. This is an enormous task that they did, and they really did a phenomenal job upgrading that operating system to have some level of security. It's night and day. It really is. Okay guys, so I figured what I'd do here is I would throw on the screen specifically the differences between the old operating system and the new one. So the background here, the image here for Integral Scan 6424, this is the new one. This, on the other hand, is the original. And we're going to see that we have reduced our medium vulnerabilities by 2. We've removed the 1 low vulnerability. And we've reduced our info, or our base configuration, from 29 to 27. And while that may not seem like a huge change, it is substantial when we take into consideration that outside of just this, we also had the problem on the other operating system with what appeared to be a backdoor access configuration, whereas on this system we no longer see that. Now, on the previous system, I didn't have the Nessus configuration set to allow us to scan for backdoors and ransomware, whereas now I do. And while I don't have that old image running anymore, I am curious as to what we would have seen in that, because again, there were configurations in play that more or less really look like backdoor access configurations. We had ports open, we had firewall rules disabled, we had authenticated accounts set up. There were things in that operating system that, even if they weren't done vindictively, from anybody that looks at it from the outside, they would have thought to themselves, what is this system trying to do, and what is the developer trying to do to gain access to my system? Now, with that said, in the previous version, I would have never recommended that operating system. But in this version, I would absolutely recommend this particular version of Windows XP Integral Edition. So what do you guys think? You think that we should do anything addition to this machine? Should we throw the Granite XP package on this system and see if we could bring it down even further, bring it down even below the 11? Because again, we're starting from a lower number than we had prior. If we install the rest of those updates, you think that we could possibly lock this down further? Do you think we'll break anything in the process of that? I'm really curious about those things myself, so that might be our next video on the integral system, is just to check out whether or not we could even further secure the operating system. But that said, as it sits right now, 2 thumbs up to Ramsey, man. He really came through. This is a lot cleaner. It's a lot more organized. It's a lot better of a package. The installation process is easier. It's all around better than it was. So thanks for watching my video, guys, and if you haven't checked it out, definitely check out Ramsey on his Zone 95 website and take a look at the integral package, especially going forward. I would highly recommend this operating system versus what our previous iteration of this OS was. It's a night and day difference. There's no longer the security concerns in this operating system that there were in the other one. Our scans are a lot cleaner. You could tell that there was a lot of emphasis put in towards organization, cleanup, getting the applications and the processes to work better together with the operating system, as well as securing the operating system. And while it's not perfect, it's still in dev, and they're still working on it, so I'm excited to see what the next release looks like. Thanks again. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Take it easy.